guys, welcome back to Snake Limited. I am John, and today I want to talk about something that I don't really think I've ever talked about before on this channel, and that's how to set up an aquarium for a ball python. Now this is going to be for people that really probably are just kind of having a ball python as a pet, and that will be using something like an Exoterra or Zoom Ed aquarium that's glass as their primary enclosure for their new pet snake. Okay, so the first thing you need is an aquarium or an enclosure. Obviously, these front opening ones like Exoterras and Zoom Eds are really the perfect things for snakes so that you're not coming down on top of the snake, which can scare them. This way, you're coming in from the front, you're a little less threatening, and it's also easier to access and see your snakes. Now, the downside to glass aquariums as opposed to a PVC aquarium is that they don't retain heat as well. But as long as you don't have the aquarium or tank in a drafty area, especially people that live in the colder climates, it shouldn't be an issue. So I'm not going to go over in depth of what specific sizing you need for a ball python on this because, you know, depending on whether you have a hatchling, a year-old, a 2-year-old, a 10-year-old, and what the size is of your actual snake is going to depend really on what size aquarium you need. Now, you don't want something that's extremely large. You don't want to get a 40-gallon breeder aquarium and throw a hatchling baby ball python in it. Having an aquarium too big, especially for a smaller snake, will cause a lot of stress, even if you have it all laid out all pretty and have all the hides and heat and everything dialed in. So you want to keep it appropriate to the size of the snake. Something this size would probably be good for maybe like a yearling, something that's about a year old, 1.5, 2 years. So, you know, the size of it is not really what we're focusing on this video. It's about really how you need to set it up to give your ball python the best life. All right, we are going to start from the ground up. The first thing you need is going to be heat tape or under the tank heaters or UTHs. Most people are probably going to be going to Amazon or a local pet store and buying, again, a Zoom Ed under the tank heater, or I don't know if Exoterra makes them or not. I actually don't have any on hand. But I have this heat tape that I had used for snake racks previously, just as an example. So this is going to go underneath the bottom of the aquarium. So as a quick example here, again, this isn't going to be something where I'm actually going through the whole thing step by step. It's going underneath the aquarium. And most of the under the tank heaters that you're going to buy from the store are going to have a sticky side. That sticky side is going to go up against the bottom of the aquarium. Now you also need to plug your heat into a thermostat. And it's going to plug right in here to the bottom of this. I use these iPower thermostats. I get them from Amazon. They're inexpensive. They're $20 or so. I use them on everything that isn't a full-blown snake rack. I have like the expensive Vivarium Electronics or Spider Robotics thermostats for those. But for single enclosures for like my boas or my other snakes that are pets, I just use these guys. They work perfectly fine. You're going to plug in your heating pad into the bottom of the thermostat. You're going to take the heating probe. You're going to take the probe and actually sandwich it. As you can see me sliding it in here. You're going to sandwich it between your heating pad and the glass. All of the heating pad and the probe are on the outside of the glass. My hand is here on the inside of the terrarium. The thermostat, as you can see, the probe and the heat tape is underneath the glass. So you want to put the probe directly against the glass, and then you want to put the heating pad underneath the probe, so it kind of sandwiches the probe between the heating pad and the glass. The heating pad you get is going to change depending on the size of the terrarium you have, and as your ball python grows, you're going to have to get bigger aquariums and bigger heating pads. But you want it to cover roughly 1/3 to 1/2 of the aquarium, because the ball python needs to decide whether it wants to be hotter or colder, and it needs to be able to move throughout the aquarium. So with this heating pad, you want it to be roughly 90 degrees on the inside. This is going to be the hot spot for the ball python. So you want it to be 90 degrees up here. Typically what that means for me is that this needs to be set to about 92 degrees, because once the thermostat checks the temperature of the heat tape and then it radiates through this glass, it's usually about 90 degrees once it gets on top of this glass here. The snake will bury down below the substrate and sit flush up against this glass to get the heat. So you want to make sure this isn't too hot because it can burn the snake. You need to take the temperature from inside the glass. Maybe even you need to have kind of a little bit of substrate here, because if you use your heat gun directly against this the glass with no substrate, it might actually get the temperature through the glass on the actual heating pad itself. Which brings us to the next part, which is getting a heat gun. It shoots a little laser and it shows you the temperature where the laser is pointing. So you're going to point this in here and check to see when it looks like it's 90 degrees so that you're getting the proper temperature and not burning your snake. But again, typically, if I set this to 92 or 93 degrees, it's at the right temperature for the snake. The next thing you need is your substrate. I use PROCOCO here. I like the chips and fiber because it has some smaller pieces in it. I've used Reptichip before and that stuff's fine. The reason I got this is because I was able to purchase a pallet of it, and I have literally half a room in my basement just full of PROCOCO. But I like how this stuff's ground up versus how the bigger chips from PROCOCO or Reptichip is actually ground up. This seems to actually be cheaper if you can actually find it anywhere as well. So you're gonna, bust open one of these blocks, and in an Exoterra or Zoom bed like this, you're probably going to want to fill it up maybe 2 inches here. That will allow the snake to move to the top of the substrate if it wants to, or it will allow the snake to kind of bury itself down and be flush against the heating element, the hot spot. And while we were talking about heating and hot and hot and cold and all that stuff, you're going to need a couple other things as well. I like these little Govee thermostats. They have the temperature and the humidity listed on here. You can either have it stand up or it has the little 3M adhesive on the back so you can stick it probably right in the middle, right in the back of the wall. So you have the temperatures and the humidity dialed in for your enclosures. These aren't very expensive, and I think this one might take a watch battery, and they last for a pretty long time. Even if you got 2 of them, put one on this side or one on this side. You need to know what the temperatures are inside at all times, because the ambient air temperature is very important for ball pythons too. You want it to be as close to 80 as you can. 75 to 80 is probably going to be okay for their overall health. And if you live in a colder area, a dome light with probably a ceramic heater is probably going to be important. And depending on how big the enclosure is, you might need 2 of these, but this will help keep the ambient air temperature up. Remember that you're using the heat tape or under tank heater as the hot spot, so you don't want this to actually provide a ton of heat. You want this to just keep the air temperature a little warmer in the aquarium, so you're getting close to 80 degrees. You don't want this to be extremely hot and very high wattage, because it will end up baking your snake. It'll be way too hot in there. So if you get 1 or 2 of these to help keep the air temperature between 75 and 80, that'll be perfect for the snake. As far as humidity goes, you'll have to kind of figure out whether or not some of the screens on top need to be covered. People use plastic wrap. Maybe they cover half of the top with plastic wrap to help keep humidity in. The other way you can help raise humidity is by misting or by adding a little extra water when you're mixing your substrate. These coconut chips hold water very well, so they're a very good option just to help keep humidity up as well. The last couple absolute necessities are the snake hides and the water bowl. So you definitely want a water bowl that the snake can get in, and it's holds a lot of water for them so they can drink as they need to. It doesn't matter where you place that, other than you don't want it directly over the hot spot. However, you do need 2 snake hides for your snake, and you're going to want to place them on both sides, opposite sides of the aquarium. You want one directly over the hot spot, so that there's a nice secure place for the snake to hide in the hot area. And then you want one on the cooler side so that the snake can thermoregulate, meaning if it wants to be cold, it comes over here where there's no heat mat. And if it wants to be hot, it comes over to this side on this snake hide where is the heat mat, so it can get nice and hot. Now you can decorate the aquarium however you'd like. Your snake does not care what your decorations are inside of there. The snakes do like to climb around. I know everybody has the very important conversation about whether or not ball pythons like to climb. You know, if you want to decorate it and put as much vertically in there as you'd like to, they do like to climb. If you're holding the ball python, it will climb up your arm, and it's not going to sit only on the ground like some of the heavier bodied snakes would. So they do definitely like to, they're a little more mobile, I should say, than some of the bigger, heavier snakes are. But you definitely want to give it some verticality. You don't need to have an extremely high aquarium for them. But even if you put some higher sticks, you know, halfway up to here maybe, so that they can climb around, that would be good. But if you want to put a SpongeBob SquarePants pineapple under the sea in the middle of here, that your ball python is not going to care if that's what you choose to decorate it with. Another important thing, not a necessity, but I recommend probably everybody to have a pair, are feeding tongs, or this is actually called a hemostat. They're kind of medical surgical devices, but they're perfect for feeding tongs. And as you see, I have these ones here. I think these are 12 inches. This gives you a nice big distance between you and the snake when you're trying to feed it. If you're feeding frozen thawed, you know, you're kind of away from striking distance at this point. And typically, even my females, especially my bigger females, I use these because they have a pretty good striking distance. And snakes aren't always the best at striking the thing you want them to strike at, and they can't accidentally tag you if you're not paying attention. So especially for new beginners, I would definitely buy a pair of hemostats so that it's easier to feed and a little less scary when you're trying to feed them. One final tool that is completely optional would be a snake hook. Most ball pythons you don't need this for. I have, out of all the ones I have here, maybe 2 or 3 that every once in a while I need to kind of give them a little nudge on the head when I go in there so they don't try to attack me. But I don't really use this for ball pythons. I actually have a couple cave-dwelling rat snakes that I usually just either wear gloves with or give them a little poke when I go in there, because the only thing they are looking at doing is trying to bite me. Because they're scared of me, but they're just trying to bite me the whole time I'm in there. But this can also be helpful for a new snake owner who's a little timid when they're trying to handle their snake. If they can't read the snake yet and this is their first pet snake, this can provide a little bit of safety. You can get it in there under the snake, maneuvered around to kind of show the snake that, you know, it's not food that's coming in there. It's you know, their owner, and it's not feeding time. And this is a nice, safe way to do that. Now make sure that you have all of this set up well in advance of you either purchasing your snake or you receiving your snake. You need to make sure that the hot spot is getting where it should be. You need to make sure that the ambient air temperature is good in the room that you have the snake in. You need to make sure that this is the environment that your snake needs to be in, a nice, safe, healthy, happy one for your snake when you get it there. So these are really all the essentials that you're going to need. There are small things here and there that may be a little extra that you'll come across down the line, but the essentials are everything that I've laid out in this video. Hopefully it's helpful to you guys, and please reach out if you have any questions about setting up your first ball python enclosure.